The crystal chandelier above table 12 cast a warm glow across the white tablecloth, reflecting off the finest silverware Chicago's money could buy. Muhammad Ali sat in Lounge 2, the city's most exclusive French restaurant, surrounded by wealth, power, and the kind of people who believed their money made them untouchable. He was about to prove them wrong. It was October 1973, and Ali was at the peak of his powers. At 31 years old, he'd already lost and regained his heavyweight title, fought his way back from exile, and become more than just a boxer. He'd become a symbol, a voice for the voiceless, a man who refused to stay silent when he witnessed injustice. Every eye in the restaurant was on him, waiting to see what the most famous athlete in the world would do next. What they witnessed that night would make headlines for weeks. Not because of what Ali said about boxing, but because of what he did for a 23-year-old waiter who was about to lose everything. This isn't just another Muhammad Ali story. This is about the moment when the most powerful voice in America decided to use his platform to fight a battle that had nothing to do with boxing and everything to do with human dignity. Marcus Johnson approached table 12 with practiced elegance, a silver tray balanced perfectly on his left hand, a bottle of 1959 Chateau Margaux in his right. He'd been working at Lounge 2 for 6 months, saving every penny for medical school tuition at Northwestern University. He was one of only 3 black employees in the entire restaurant, and he knew he had to be twice as good to keep his job. Tonight, he had to be perfect. Because tonight, Muhammad Ali was his table. Marcus had rehearsed his approach 100 times in the mirror of the staff bathroom. Smile, but don't stare. Be professional, but not cold. Make the champion feel welcome without being overly familiar. He moved through the crowded dining room, weaving between tables of Chicago's elite, politicians, businessmen, old money families who'd been dining at Lounge 2 since it opened in 1952. He reached table 12, his heart pounding but his hands steady. "Good evening, Mr. Ali. It's an honor to serve you tonight." Ali looked up, and that famous smile broke across his face like sunrise. "What's your name, young brother?" "Marcus, sir." "Marcus Johnson." "Well, Marcus Johnson, you can drop the sir. Makes me feel old." "Just Ali is fine." Marcus relaxed slightly. Maybe this wouldn't be so hard after all. He began the wine service, showing Ali the label, getting his approval, preparing to pour. This was the ritual he'd practiced 1,000 times. Cut the foil, insert the corkscrew, apply steady pressure, remove the cork, wipe the bottle's mouth, pour a taste for approval. But as Marcus leaned forward to pour the tasting portion, someone at the neighboring table shifted suddenly, bumping Marcus's elbow hard. The bottle tilted at the worst possible angle. Wine splashed across the white tablecloth, dark red spreading like blood across pristine linen. The restaurant went silent. Marcus froze, the bottle still in his hand, watching the stains spread across the expensive fabric. His heart hammered against his ribs. His scholarship depended on this job. His mother's medical bills depended on this job. His entire future depended on this job. "I'm so sorry," Marcus said, his voice tight with panic. "I'll clean this immediately, Mr. Ali. I'll bring a fresh bottle at no charge and, it's just wine, brother," Ali said calmly, his voice cutting through Marcus's panic. "No harm done. Accidents happen." But Richard Sterling, the restaurant's general manager, had already spotted the commotion from across the room. He moved toward table 12 with the purposeful stride of a man about to make an example out of someone. Sterling was 52 years old, third-generation owner of Lounge 2, and he ran his restaurant like a military operation. He believed in standards. He believed in excellence. And he believed, though he'd never say it openly in 1973, that certain people simply didn't belong in establishments like his. "What is the meaning of this?" Sterling's voice cut through the silence like a blade. Marcus turned and Ali saw fear flash across the young man's face. Real fear. The kind that comes from knowing you're about to lose everything. "Mr. Sterling, I apologize. There was an accident with the wine, but nothing." Sterling interrupted, his voice rising loud enough for half the restaurant to hear. "This is a 300 bottle of wine ruined because you can't perform the most basic function of your job." "Sir," someone bumped my elbow. "Don't make excuses." Sterling turned to Ali, his tone shifting to something obsequious and apologetic. "Mr. Ali, please accept my deepest apologies. This is absolutely unacceptable. I assure you this waiter will be terminated immediately, and your entire meal tonight will be complimentary." And there it was. The word that Marcus had been dreading. Terminated. Ali set down his water glass slowly, very slowly. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but everyone within 3 tables could hear every word. "Did you just say you're going to fire this young man?" Sterling blinked, surprised by the question. "Mr. Ali, I assure you we have standards." "I asked you a question," Ali interrupted, his voice still quiet, but carrying an edge that made the air in the restaurant feel electric. "Are you firing him?" "Well, yes. Such carelessness cannot be tolerated in an establishment of this caliber." What happened next would become part of Chicago legend. Muhammad Ali stood up from his chair. All 6 feet, 3 inches of him, the heavyweight champion of the world rising to his full height in the middle of Loch 2's dining room. Every conversation stopped, every fork paused halfway to every mouth. Even the kitchen staff peered through the service window to see what was happening. "Then I need to tell you something, Mr. Sterling," Ali said, his voice carrying now, reaching every corner of the restaurant. "I've been in the ring with Sonny Liston. I've fought Joe Frazier. I've taken punches that would kill most men. But I ain't never seen anything as ugly as what you just did." Richard Sterling's face flushed red. He glanced around the dining room, suddenly aware that every patron, every waiter, every busboy had stopped what they were doing to watch this confrontation unfold. "Mr. Ali, perhaps we should discuss this in private." "No." Ali's voice was firm. "We're going to discuss it right here, because everyone in this restaurant just heard you humiliate this young man in public. So they're going to hear what I have to say about it in public." Sterling opened his mouth, then closed it. He'd built a career on reading powerful people, knowing when to push and when to yield. And something in Muhammad Ali's eyes told him this was not a man who would yield. Ali turned to Marcus, who stood frozen, still holding the wine bottle. "Marcus, how long you been working here?" "6 months, sir. I mean, a lie. And why you working here? What's your dream?" Marcus's voice was barely above a whisper. "Medical school, Northwestern. I start next fall if I can save enough for tuition." Ali nodded slowly, then turned back to Sterling. "You hear that? This young brother ain't just pouring wine to pay bills. He's got a dream. He's trying to become a doctor. And you just tried to destroy that dream because he spilled some wine. Or Mr. Ali, I understand you're upset, but I must maintain standards." "Standards?" Ali's voice rose for the first time. "Let me tell you about standards. I look at Marcus here, and I see a young man working hard, treating people with respect, trying to build a future. I look at you, and I see a man who just tried to ruin someone's life over a wine stain. So you tell me, Mr. Sterling, who's got real standards here?" The silence in Loch 2 was absolute. A woman at table 8 held her fork halfway to her mouth, frozen. A couple near the window had stopped mid-conversation. The entire restaurant had become an audience to something none of them had expected to witness. Sterling's jaw worked, but no words came out. His face cycled through expressions: anger, embarrassment, calculation. He was trapped, and he knew it. Muhammad Ali had just backed him into a corner in front of his wealthiest patrons. Furthermore, Ali continued, his voice dropping back to that quiet, dangerous tone. "I want to know why you're so quick to fire Marcus over an accident, but I bet you ain't never fired one of your white waiters for the same thing." That's not." Sterling sputtered. "This has nothing to do with." "Don't lie to me." Ali stepped closer to Sterling. "I've seen this my whole life. I've lived in a country that told me I wasn't good enough, wasn't smart enough, wasn't worthy enough, all because of my skin color. I fought my way to the top of the world, and you know what? I still see young brothers like Marcus getting treated like they're less than human, and I'm done being quiet about it." Marcus stood trembling, tears streaming down his face. This was really happening. Muhammad Ali was fighting for him, not in a boxing ring, but in a restaurant, with words instead of fists, and somehow it felt even more powerful. Ali turned to address the entire dining room, his voice carrying the same electricity he brought to his fights, the same charisma that made millions of people stop what they were doing to listen when he spoke. "I want everyone in this restaurant to understand something," Ali said. "This young man, Marcus Johnson, he's working his way through medical school. He's going to be a doctor someday. He's going to save lives. And tonight, this manager tried to destroy his future because someone bumped his elbow and some wine spilled. That tell you something about what's really going on here?" Ali let the question hang in the air. Then he turned back to Sterling. "So here's what's going to happen. Either Marcus keeps his job, gets a raise, and receives an apology from you in front of all these good people, or I walk out of this restaurant right now and I tell every reporter in Chicago about how Lodge 2 treats its black employees. What's it going to be? Richard Sterling stood at a crossroads. On one side was his pride, his authority, his belief that he ran his restaurant the way he saw fit. On the other side was Muhammad Ali, the most famous person in the world, threatening to destroy Lodge 2's reputation with a single interview. But more than that, Sterling suddenly saw something he'd been blind to his entire life. He looked around his dining room and saw the faces of his patrons, wealthy, powerful people who'd always treated him with respect because he ran the finest restaurant in Chicago. But their eyes weren't looking at him with respect anymore. They were looking at him with something else. Disappointment, disgust, judgment. And then he looked at Marcus Johnson, really looked at him for the first time, not as the black waiter, or the help, or any of the other ways Sterling had mentally categorized him. He saw a 23-year-old kid who was terrified of losing everything he'd worked for. A kid who had been working doubles and weekends to save money for medical school. A kid whose only crime was having his elbow bumped while pouring wine. Sterling had a daughter Marcus's age. Sarah was studying at Wellesley, pursuing her dream of becoming a lawyer. Sterling paid her tuition without a second thought, bragged about her to anyone who would listen, beamed with pride when he talked about her future. What was Marcus Johnson but someone else's Sarah? Some other father's pride and joy. The realization hit Sterling like a physical blow. He'd been about to destroy this young man's life over a wine stain. Over nothing, because of prejudices he'd carried his whole life without examining them, without questioning them, without seeing the humanity in people who looked different from him. "Mr. Ali," Sterling said, and his voice cracked. "You're right." The words seemed to cost him something. His shoulders slumped. When he turned to Marcus, there were tears in his eyes. "Marcus, I owe you an apology. A real one. Not because Mr. Ali is here. Not because I'm afraid of bad publicity. But because what I just did was wrong. It was cruel, and it was rooted in prejudices that I've carried my whole life without examining them." He paused, struggling to find the right words. "When I look at you, I should see what Mr. Ali sees. A hardworking young man pursuing his dreams. Instead, I've been looking at you through a lens that was handed down to me by my father and his father and their fathers before them. A lens that tells me people like you don't belong in places like this. But that lens is broken. It's always been broken. And I'm ashamed that it took Muhammad Ali embarrassing me in front of my entire restaurant for me to see it." Sterling turned to address the dining room, his voice strengthening. "Ladies and gentlemen, you've all witnessed me treat one of my employees with cruelty and prejudice. You've seen Muhammad Ali stand up for him when no one else would. I hope you'll remember this night. I know I will, because it's the night I learned that being a good manager isn't just about maintaining standards. It's about treating every person who works for me with the dignity and respect they deserve." He turned back to Marcus. "You're not fired. In fact, effective immediately, you're getting a raise, $2 more per hour. And I want you to come to my office tomorrow so we can discuss setting up a scholarship fund here at Lodge 2 to help our employees pursue higher education. You shouldn't have to work yourself into exhaustion to afford medical school. Let us help." Marcus couldn't speak. He could only nod, tears streaming freely down his face. Sterling extended his hand to Marcus. They shook, and in that handshake was an acknowledgement that something fundamental had shifted, not just in Lodge 2, but in Richard Sterling himself. Then Sterling turned to Ollie and extended his hand. "Mr. Ollie, thank you. I don't mean thank you for having dinner here. I mean thank you for showing me who I've been and who I need to become." Ali took his hand. "Mr. Sterling, it takes a big man to admit he was wrong in front of all these people. I respect that. I really do." The restaurant remained quiet for perhaps 3 more seconds. Then, from table 8, an elderly woman began to clap, slowly at first, then faster. Within moments, the entire dining room had erupted in applause. People stood from their tables. Waiters stopped mid-service to join in. Even the kitchen staff, who'd been watching through the service window, came out to applaud. Marcus stood in the center of it all, overwhelmed, his face wet with tears. Muhammad Ali put his arm around the young man's shoulders and pulled him into an embrace. "You're going to be a great doctor someday," Ali whispered in his ear. "Don't you ever forget what you're worth." "Thank you," Marcus managed to say. "Thank you for fighting for me. That's what champions do," Ali said. We'll fight for people who can't fight for themselves. That's the only kind of fighting that really matters." The applause continued for what felt like an eternity. When it finally died down, people returned to their meals, but the atmosphere in Lodge 2 had fundamentally changed. Conversations at every table turned to what they'd just witnessed. The story was already spreading. Within hours, it would be all over Chicago. By morning, it would be national news. Muhammad Ali sat back down at table 12. Marcus, still shaking but with steadier hands now, carefully poured him a glass from a fresh bottle of wine. "On the house," Sterling said from behind them, "the whole meal. Not as an apology to you, Mr. Ali, but as a thank you." Ali raised his glass. "To Marcus Johnson, future doctor, current champion." The rest of the evening passed without incident, though people kept approaching table 12 to shake Ali's hand, to thank him, to tell him that what he'd done mattered. Ali accepted their gratitude with grace, but he kept redirecting attention to Marcus. "That young brother right there is the real hero," Ali would say. "He's out here working 2 jobs to chase his dream. That's courage. That's heroism." Before Ali left that night, he did something that wouldn't become public until years later. He pulled Richard Sterling aside and handed him a check. "For that scholarship fund you mentioned," Ali said, "to help other kids like Marcus." Sterling looked at the check, then at Ali. It was for 10 sellers and the equivalent of nearly $70,000 today. "You don't have to do this," Sterling said. "Yeah, I do," Ali replied. "Because what happened tonight shouldn't have taken me being here. Marcus deserved to be treated with respect, whether I was in this restaurant or not. This money is to make sure other kids get that respect even when there's no champion around to stand up for them." The story of what happened at Lodge 2 on that October night in 1973 spread quickly. The Chicago Tribune ran it on the front page. Ali stands up for waiter, changes restaurant policy. The story went national within days. Siebes News interviewed Marcus. Time magazine ran a feature on Ali's activism outside the ring. But the real impact wasn't in the headlines. It was in the changes that rippled outward from that single moment. Richard Sterling kept his word. Lodge 2 established the Marcus Johnson Scholarship Fund within a month. Over the next decade, it would help 47 employees pursue college and graduate degrees. Sterling also changed his hiring practices, actively recruiting from Chicago's black community and promoting based on merit rather than assumptions. More importantly, Sterling changed personally. He began attending civil rights meetings. He educated himself about systemic racism. He used his position in Chicago's restaurant community to push for fair employment practices across the industry. He wasn't perfect, he had a lifetime of prejudice to unlearn, but he tried, really tried. And Marcus Johnson, he graduated from Northwestern Medical School in 1977. He specialized in emergency medicine, eventually becoming the head of the year at Cook County Hospital. Over his 40-year career, he saved countless lives. But he never forgot the night Muhammad Ali saved his. In 1992, when Ali was honored at the NACPIMAGE Awards, Marcus was invited to speak. He stood at the podium and told the story of that night at Lodge 2. "Muhammad Ali didn't just save my job that night," Marcus said. "He taught me what it means to use your power to lift up others. He showed me that real strength isn't about how hard you can hit. It's about when you choose to fight and who you choose to fight for." He paused, emotion choking his voice. "I've spent my career saving lives in the air. But my life was saved first in a restaurant by a man who saw a scared kid about to lose everything and decided that justice mattered more than a meal. Mr. Ali, if you're watching this, I became a doctor because of you. Every life I've saved, every patient I've helped. That's your legacy too." Ali, who was sitting in the audience dealing with the increasing effects of Parkinson's disease, couldn't speak easily anymore. But his daughter Layla said he watched Marcus's speech with tears streaming down his face. After the ceremony, Ali shuffled over to Marcus and pulled him into a long embrace. No words were needed. Years later, when researchers were documenting Muhammad Ali's impact beyond boxing, they kept returning to stories like the one from Lodge 2. Not the famous fights, not the political activism that made headlines, but the smaller moments, the individual lives Ali changed simply by refusing to accept injustice when he saw it. A sociology professor from Columbia University wrote a paper analyzing the Lodge 2 incident as a case study in how individual actions can challenge systemic oppression. What Ali did that night wasn't revolutionary in the traditional sense, the paper argued. He didn't change laws, he didn't lead a march, but he used his platform to force one man to confront his prejudices. And in doing so, he created a ripple effect that changed an entire institution. The paper documented the before and after of Lodge 2. Before October 1973, Lodge 2 employed 3 black workers out of 47 total staff. By 1980, it was 42% black. Before 1973, no black employee had ever been promoted to management. By 1985, 2 of the restaurant's 4 managers were black. The scholarship fund Ali started with his 10,000 check grew to over $2 million through donations and fundraising. It's still active today, now called the Ali Johnson Scholarship for Service Industry Workers Pursuing Higher Education. It's helped over 300 people attend college. But statistics only tell part of the story. The real impact was in the individual lives changed, like Jennifer Martinez, a Latina hostess who used the scholarship to become a lawyer and now runs a nonprofit defending workers' rights, or Tyrone Washington, a dishwasher who became a chef, opened his own restaurant, and created his own scholarship fund modeled after Ali's. Each of them carried forward the lesson of that October night. Use whatever power you have to lift up others. Refuse to be silent when you witness injustice. Recognize that your actions ripple outward in ways you can't predict or measure. Muhammad Ali fought 61 professional boxing matches in his career. He won 56 of them. Those fights made him famous, made him wealthy, made him a legend. But Ali himself said many times that his real fights, the ones that mattered most, happened outside the ring. I fought in the ring to make a living, Ali told an interviewer in 1998. But I fought outside the ring to make a difference. Any man can throw punches. But can you stand up when you see someone being mistreated? Can you use your voice when someone else has lost theirs? That's the real test of a champion. The incident at Lodge 2 was one of dozens of similar moments throughout Ali's life. He stopped traffic to help a man threatening suicide. He paid for strangers' groceries when he overheard them saying they couldn't afford food. He visited sick children in hospitals, not for publicity, but because he wanted them to know someone cared. He used his fame as a weapon against injustice. And he did it not with grand gestures, but with small acts of human decency, refusing to accept a reservation at a segregated club, walking out of a store that followed black customers, confronting a restaurant manager who tried to fire a waiter. These weren't the actions of someone seeking publicity. They were the reflexes of someone who had experienced discrimination himself and refused to watch it happen to others. Ali had been denied service at restaurants as a child. He'd been called names, been told he didn't belong, been treated as less than human. Those experiences didn't make him bitter. They made him vigilant. They made him someone who would always stand up when he saw someone else being pushed down. People ask me all the time, Ali, how do you want to be remembered? Ali said in one of his last interviews before Parkinson's took most of his speech, I don't want to be remembered as the man who beat Sonny Liston or George Foreman. I want to be remembered as the man who stood up for people who couldn't stand up for themselves. That's my real record. That's the fight that matters. Richard Sterling ran Lodge 2 until his death in 2003. In his will, he left a portion of his estate to the Ali Johnson Scholarship Fund and wrote a letter to be read at his funeral. I lived 52 years as one kind of man and 30 years as another, the letter said. The difference was one night in October 1973 when Muhammad Ali showed me who I really was. I wasn't the good man I thought I was, but I spent the rest of my life trying to become him. I hope I succeeded, at least a little bit. Marcus Johnson retired from medicine in 2017 after a distinguished 40-year career. He still lives in Chicago, still tells the story of that night at Lodge 2 to anyone who will listen. People think of Muhammad Ali as the greatest boxer, Marcus says, but I knew him as the greatest human being. He saved my life without throwing a single punch. Lodge 2 is still operating, now run by Sterling's daughter Sarah. The restaurant has a permanent display in the lobby, a photo of Muhammad Ali at table 12 next to a bronze plaque that reads, on this site in October 1973, Muhammad Ali taught us that true class has nothing to do with crystal chandeliers or fine wine. True class is standing up for what's right, even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable. And Muhammad Ali, he died in June 2016, mourned by millions around the world. At his funeral, one of the eulogies was given by Dr. Marcus Johnson, who said, Muhammad Ali fought in many rings. But his greatest victory was showing us that the most important fights aren't for titles or belts. They're for dignity, for justice, for the idea that every human being deserves to be treated with respect. He won that fight. We just have to keep it going. The story of what happened at Luch 2 that October night has been told and retold countless times. It's been the subject of books, documentaries, even a play. But the essence of the story remains simple. A young man was about to lose everything. A champion stood up for him, and in doing so, that champion taught a room full of people, and eventually millions more, what it really means to be great. Because greatness isn't measured in championships. It's measured in the lives you touch, the stands you take, the moments when you choose to use your power to lift someone else up instead of putting them down. Muhammad Ali was the greatest boxer who ever lived. But that night at Luch 2, he showed he was something more. He was the greatest kind of human being, the kind who fights for others, the kind who stands up even when it would be easier to sit down, the kind who sees someone in trouble and says, "Not on my watch." That's the real legacy of Muhammad Ali. Not the fights he won in the ring, but the battles he fought outside it. Not the punches he threw, but the stands he took. Not how many times he knocked opponents down, but how many times he lifted people up. And somewhere in Chicago, in doctors' offices and emergency rooms, Marcus Johnson spent 40 years saving lives, still carrying forward the lesson he learned that night from the greatest champion the world has ever known. Use whatever power you have to make a difference. Stand up for those who can't stand up for themselves. That's what champions do. That's what heroes do. That's what Muhammad Ali did. And that's why 50 years later, people still tell the story of the night Muhammad Ali saved a waiter's dream and changed a restaurant forever.